What is your full name?
James Anthony Reiss, R-E-I-S-S.
Where and when were you born?
I was born in Detroit, Michigan on November the 14th, 1925.
And how old are you currently?
91.
And can you tell me what was your highest rank by the time you left the armed services?
Corporal.
And can you also tell me the units that you were a part of during the Second World War?
I only was attached to one organization, and that was the 106th Infantry Division, 423rd Regiment, Company L.
And what was your specific role in that company?
I was a rifleman, a combat rifleman.
So, let's backtrack a little bit. You were born in Detroit. You grew up there as well?
Yes.
Talk to me about growing up in Detroit. What kind of things would you do for fun as a small child?
As a small child, I went to school. That's all we did, you know. Dances on the weekend. Just ordinary childhood. Nothing.
What were the names of your parents and what were their occupations?
My dad was named Anthony John Reiss, and he was an advertising manager for a small paint company that was a division of Sherwin-Williams, and he was eventually elevated to vice president of that company. Spent 35 years, his whole working life with them. My mother was a homemaker, and I had a brother and an older sister.
And did your brother also serve?
In the Korean War, my brother served.
So, you were the middle child.
I was the middle child, yes. Actually, my sister was adopted. She was my first cousin, and they needed a home for her, so my parents took her in as an adoptee.
Can you talk to me about what kind of hobbies and interests you had growing up?
I was really interested in chemistry, and I had chemical sets, and I was also an excellent table tennis player, ping pong player. I was a champion, and my brother and I were doubles champions, so we had a lot of fun doing that, and but primarily it was school.
What high school did you go to and what year did you graduate?
I went to military academy for the first 2 years in Columbia, Tennessee, and then for 2 years I came back because World War II was on, and my parents didn't want me to graduate from a military academy and be taken into the Army as a second lieutenant and be cannon fodder, which was, I mean, I was cannon fodder anyhow. But the last 2 years I spent in Redford High School in Detroit and graduated from there.
And what year did you graduate?
1944, January of 1944.
Wow.
I turned 18 on November and had to get a draft deferment until I graduated. So then I was inducted into the service on March 10th, 1944.
Can you talk to me about when you and your buddies would get together in your teenage years? What kind of things you guys would do for fun?
Oh, we were all into heavy dancing. We had dance clubs, and every weekend was Friday and Saturday nights were always dancing groups. Sunday I spent with my family at church, and then during the summertime we went to the baseball games and things like that.
Did you go study with anyone growing up?
No.
But you went on dates?
Oh, all the time on dates.
What kind of things would you guys do for dates back then?
Dancing, go to dances, and that was that. Basically, it was dancing groups of people.
Can you talk to me about some specific incidences that made you realize that there was a Great Depression going on?
Well, we had a lot of guys that would stop by looking for work, and they must have put a mark on our curb or something. Our home was on a corner, and a lot of guys would show up to do handyman work, and my parents hired. They were well off enough that they could hire a laundress, and we had a full-time maid, and we had actually two laundresses, and then we had an outside guy, and those were used occasionally. So I knew that there was a depression going on. My dad made it very clear that money was tight, and he took a 10% cut in his paycheck, and that's all. But so I did not grow up poor at all. As a matter of fact, my parents built a home during the Depression. Yeah, they constructed a home. So I really didn't feel the Depression as such.
What were your first few jobs growing up?
Oh, I worked in the grocery stores. I worked at Kroger's for a while in the vegetable department. I worked at another small cash and carry grocery store. I was a postman on Christmas time, Christmas relief, and that type of thing.
And can you talk to me about, were you aware of what was happening in Europe with the expansion of the Nazi Empire and with Japan invading China? I mean, was that fully, you know?
I used to collect war cards.
What's that?
And it was like in a chewing gum, like a Topps card in a baseball pack. They used to put out war cards.
What kind of things would be on the war cards?
Well, they had practically the entire Chinese, Japanese Sino War and on cards. So I got to know a little bit about the slaughters in Peking and all over the areas. But the German thing was that was really hidden from me. I had no idea what was going on, especially in the DP camps. I had no idea.
And what does DP stand for?
Displaced person.
Okay. Can you talk to me about where you were when you heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor?
I was home, and it was December the 7th, and we were home on Christmas leave from military school. And I knew right then and there that everything was going to change, because my folks were really stunned by this thing. And
you heard about it on the radio?
yes, yeah.
What was that like to hear that your country had been attacked?
Ooh, it was an amazing problem. Everybody in our family they knew right away that we were going to be impacted, because all of my cousins were war age, and they were ready, I'm sure, ready to go. As a matter of fact, one of them had already been drafted in before Pearl Harbor. I think, yes, yeah, he had gone. Leonard had gone in before. Not Walter had gone in before. So it was a catastrophic day, of course.
And you must have been, what, 16 when it happened?
41, I'd be 16. Mm-hmm.
Did you want to get in?
No.
Why not?
Oh, I don't know. It never entered my mind.
So, take me through what happens. You graduate high school.
Yeah.
You get your deferment until you graduate. Then what happens?
I got drafted. On the 10th of March, I left and went to Fort Sheridan, Illinois. They put us through a series of tests. And
Is this induction or was this basic training?
This is the induction station.
Where was the Illinois?
Fort Sheridan, Illinois, right outside of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And then they put us on a train and took us to Camp Walters, Texas, for my basic training, for my 16-week basic.
Talk to me about basic training. What do you remember?
Pain in the ass basic training? What do you want to know? It just...
Take me through a typical day.
Up at 5:30 in the morning, chow, maybe close order drill, for an hour, then into extended order drill for an hour, and then into specialty stuff like shooting range, capturing a house, rifleman work of all kinds, digging trenches, that type of thing. Then break at noon for probably in lunch or supper in the field. In the afternoon, we might go on a hike, and then at 3 o'clock they'd give us a break for a couple of hours, and then at 5 we'd have chow again, and then the nighttime we were free.
Who were some of the guys that you got close to?
Not many. I was friends with a guy we called the Chin. He had a good long chin. And no, I didn't make many friends there. No.
Did everyone kind of keep to themselves?
It was, I don't know really. There was no time for camaraderie. It just didn't seem to be a part of what we were going to do. And it was the same way everywhere except in England. And when I got to England, we had plenty of time to do things, and I had some real good friends there.
At this point, when you guys are in Texas, do you know if you're going to be heading off to the ETO or the Pacific?
I had no idea. No.
Did you have a preference?
No, I didn't.
So, do you remember your drill sergeant?
Yeah, well, he's Corporal Gould. He was an absolute sadist.
Why?
Well, he just you couldn't satisfy him, but he served his purpose because I'm the type of person that says if he can do it, I can do it, and so I wasn't going to let him beat me. And so when he'd get me up, I'd get up. When he'd say do this, I'd do that. And I hated him so much that he was my motivation to do the best I could do. And I became an expert infantryman, which was a badge that I earned called the Expert Infantryman Badge. And it looks like the combat infantryman's badge, except it doesn't have the wreath around it. And it paid me $5 a month, and I had to do so many push-ups, so many sit-ups, so many chin-ups, so many this and that, and dig a foxhole in a certain period of time, and just good basic infantryman type stuff. And so I did. I passed that, and I was one of only 3 people in the whole group that did that. So
Explain to me, how many push-ups are we talking about, for example?
I think it was 40. Yeah.
After basic training, where are you sent?
I was sent home on a what they call a delay en route, and my assignment came through while I was home. I was to report to Camp Atterbury, Indiana, to the 106th Division. They were marshaling their forces there at Atterbury, Indiana, and I was a replacement. They had been on maneuvers for so long that they were losing men on the maneuvers, if you can imagine.
Like guys would get killed.
No, they weren't getting killed, but they were getting hernias and all kinds of stuff. So they needed replacements, and I became a replacement in the 106th L Company 423rd.
What do you remember when you joined them? I mean, as this completely new stranger.
Well, the thing that, since I had become an expert infantryman, I had also been asked to take a test to become a lieutenant and report to Fort Benning, Georgia, and I was accepted. But the Army was working slow, and they sent me to Atterbury, so I was waiting for that commission statement to come through, and it never came through.
So you never got to go to OCS?
No, I didn't go to OCS. So all of my real focus was towards getting ready to go to OCS, and unfortunately, as I say, it didn't come through. By the time I shipped over, I'm sure it was out of their minds completely.
Can you talk to me, because you were stateside for a while, can you talk to me about the sacrifices that the country was making for the war effort?
Well, of course, the rationing was huge. And when I was a civilian, we were on gas rationing, and we really scrounged to get any place. And we had a guy that seemed to have access to what they call a T-stamp, which is a truck stamp. And he was able to sneak some extra T-stamps that we were able to buy gasoline with. So we knew there was a black market, and we knew that there was rationing. And of course, my folks had to surrender my ration card, my meat and butter ration card, when I was inducted. And they held on to that as long as they possibly could. And then, so we knew about the rationing, the hard type stuff for that. And we were collectors, you know, we collected the old toothpaste tubes and grease and things like that they were picking up for the war effort. And recycling clothes and lots of different things like that.
Did you have any personal feelings towards the Germans or the Japanese at this time?
At this time?
No, at that time, excuse me.
At that time, no. Of course, we were all upset with the Japanese, and we didn't know what the Germans were doing to the Jewish population, or I didn't anyhow. And but if you ask me about it now, I could tell you I still harbor feelings about the Germans.
What kind of feelings?
I just liked them intensely. I mean, they were cruel, and they just seemed to me to be oriented towards expansion, and that's it. I don't think they have a faith of any kind, or, I mean, they should, but they don't.
Is this stemming from your experiences fighting them or as a POW?
I think as a POW, yeah, I think. They were brutal to many of the POWs, brutal to the Russians, especially the Russians. And they were scary to us. They didn't beat us around, but we were guarded by the kids and the Blood and Hour, the Blur and Ur boys, which
Is that like Hitler Youth?
yeah, the Hitler Youth. And on the march that I had to make from the railroad tracks in Frankfurt to the last camp I was in, Bad Orb, we were guarded by them. And some of our guys got into a field and dug up some turnips and ate them, which was a mistake. And they got diarrhea, and these guys would not stop and let these fellas relieve themselves, so that just ran down their pants and legs, you know, just they just were. I mean, we walked for 55 minutes, and we were off for 5. Then we'd walk again for 55 minutes, and off for 5. And they did not deviate, and all these sick guys are doubling over on the road, and they wouldn't deviate. And that was awful 2 days, awful.
Did you receive any specialized training stateside?
I was expert on the BAR.
Why didn't they make you BAR man then?
They didn't. We had one in the squad when, as I said, I was a replacement, and the BAR guy was in the squad, so they didn't need me. I was a backup, and that was it.
Gosh, how many guys were in this squad?
12.
And then
12-man squad.
4 squads make up a platoon.
Four lines of 12 make up a platoon.
And then 4 platoons a company.
In a company.
So, when you joined these guys, where did you join them?
Atterbury, Indiana.
Did you become close to anyone in your squad?
No, the sergeant and I got along real well, Sergeant Monteverdi.
He make it out of the war?
Yes, but he died real quick afterwards. I kept in touch with him, for a while, but he passed away 40 years ago.
So did you participate in any of the maneuvers?
We had one maneuver while we were at Atterbury, just a refresher type of a course.
What kind of maneuver?
A 2-day open field maneuver.
Meaning what?
Well, we'd be in a trench, and they told us to move out as a line with our guns to our side and ready to shoot. We weren't shooting, but we were on that line. And then we captured this particular place, set up a command post, and then fortified the command post and sent out sentries and things like that.
Just to jump forward, can you tell me all the training that you guys went through, maneuvers and everything, did it ever come close to the real thing?
No. No.
Was it almost useless, the maneuvers, or you think it had purpose?
Oh, I think it had a purpose. I can see the value in it, yes. And it's a discipline that you need while you're in the front lines. Definitely.
So, can you explain to me, stateside, if someone does something that's out of order, what's the usual punishment?
I think they take away their privileges. I didn't see much of that.
Like liberty, that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
So, after Indiana, where'd you go?
They took us to England, or Camp Miles Standish, Massachusetts, and they put us on the Queen Elizabeth and took us overseas.
At this point, are you proud to be in the uniform?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, by this time we're seeing all the gruesome films of what's going on over there, and we're getting angrier and angrier at the time. Yeah. I'm a proud infantryman.
Even at that time, though?
Yeah.
What kind of films are you talking about?
What?
What kind of films are you talking about?
Oh, they had orientation films that we went to at least once or twice a week. Hollywood was grinding these things out and showing all the atrocities and the bombings and things like that. And of course, they had a tremendous amount of footage of the Britain being decimated as bad as they were, and so yeah, we were getting the feel of what was about to happen.
Mr. Reese, you're one of the younger veterans, of
Right.
course. Because you were 18, in 44. Can you tell me? There are guys that I've interviewed that have gone from 90 to 103, right? So many people were involved. Did you guys feel like the guys who were a couple years older than you, for example, were they in the same group as you, or would they? I don't know if this.
Yeah, there didn't seem to be any age recognition at all. We were all just the guys.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
So you could have been with a guy who was, you were 18 and he could have
He'd
been
be
25.
34, and I'd liked him or disliked him as much as I would have anybody else.
Okay, so it's not like guys tried to stick with guys their own
No,
age.
it wasn't there that I saw anyhow. No.
It was just guys.
Yeah.
So you go to Massachusetts, and I'm assuming you board a troop transport.
We went on the Queen Elizabeth. Yeah.
Okay. And you didn't need a escort, did you then?
No, because the ship has great speed and the Wolfpack couldn't keep up with it. So.
How did you spend your time on the ship?
That's really vague. It seemed to me like I was standing in line for chow all the time. I don't know. There were so many of us on there that it was amazing. I was on a 4-deck bed. I guess you call it a bed. It was bunks with canvas, and I don't know what I did. I really don't.
So, where do you guys go? Scotland?
We went to, they landed in the Firth of Clyde up in Scotland. And then they took us by train to Cheltenham, which is in the middle of the Cotswolds in England. And that's where they had a large racetrack there, and they had swept the horses out, and they put us in the stalls. And we used our bedrolls for to sleep. And then after 2 days, they marshaled a bunch of us out and told us to leave our gear and take just what we're wearing and maybe a change of underwear and stuff like that. And they took us up to around Ipswich, and we were to destroy or take down a medical evac station that was placed on a castle.
Is this a maneuver?
No, it's not a maneuver. They just were, during the invasion in June, they had set up on many castle grounds medical evac stations so that when the wounded came back, they could put them into these Quonset huts and take care of them. And this particular castle they sent us to, we were tearing the evac station down.
Because they weren't needed?
They weren't needed any longer, no.
When did you guys get over to Scotland in England? What month?
That was early September.
Okay. So how did you hear about D-Day?
Oh, D-Day was in June.
I know, but I'm saying you heard about it.
We were in, I was probably in Miles, oh no, I was in Camp Walters, Texas, when D-Day hit. Yeah, I remember. We just thought, well, the war's over.
That's what I was going to say. Did you think that you might not even go overseas?
Yeah, right. We said the war is over. They've invaded. And yeah, that was right. It was a real big party that night on 3.2 beer.
What beer?
I think it's 3.2, isn't it, or 2.3? It's a very low alcohol rate in the beer. That's what they served the GIs.
So, you get over to England in September. What do they have you do before you guys head over to France?
I just told you.
Besides
we
that?
went to Ipswich to tear down a medical evac station.
Besides that, though?
That's it.
That's all?
There was nothing else.
Did you ever go into London?
No.
Oh, so you didn't see the destruction?
No.
So after you tore down the evac center, they sent you to France?
No, they sent us back to Cheltenham, and somebody had thrown a Molotov cocktail into our stall and burned up all my equipment, and so they issued me British equipment, which they have the worst equipment. They have rib wool socks.
What's that
and
mean?
Our socks were cotton and absorbs water really well. Wool doesn't. Wool just stays wet. And unfortunately, we lost everything in the fire. So they issued all of the underwear, all British underwear and everything. We didn't have it. I guess they didn't have any American stuff.
Did you lose any of your personal items as well, besides
We
the...
lost everything except my Bible. I had that with me.
Did they find out who threw the cocktail?
No. Terrible.
So talk to me. After you got your British gear, What happens from there?
Then they shipped us overseas. They put us on a canal boat and sent us over across the channel and to Le Havre, France. And Le Havre, France had they had gone in with a whole bunch of equipment around early September. It was after the main invasion in Normandy, so there was still remnants in the channel. So we had to go over the side of the boat, of the main boat, the channel, LCI, LCT, which is the landing craft transport. Yeah, we had to go over the side and into an LCI, into a small boat, and it was loaded with water. And I got my combat boots got wet, and I'm wearing these rotten British wool socks, and I can't get rid of the water. My feet start to freeze because it's freezing cold, worst winter they had ever had. And so I take my combat boots off, and I'm over a fire, and I'm drying out my socks, or trying to. And then I can't get my combat boots back on.
Why?
Because my feet had swollen. I'm in the middle of the start of trench foot. So
this is your first day?
This is my over the side of the boat onto the shore, and my feet start to swell. So I can't get my combat boots back on. So what I do, they did give us galoshes.
What's a galosh?
It's a rubber boot that goes over your combat boots. It's a rubber boot.
Huh. It's like another boot?
Yeah, but it doesn't weigh much. It's all rubber, and it has clamps too.
Okay.
And it's called a galosh. And so what I did was that I tore up a blanket. Somebody gave me a blanket, or I took it out of my own blankets or something, and I tore it up, and I stuffed the blanket into the into the galoshes, threw away the combat boots. They weren't any good for me anymore. I couldn't get them on, and just wore the galoshes.
For the entire war?
When I was captured, I had them on. That's all I had. Yeah. And so that was the first misery, of course. And then we stayed overnight at Camp Lucky Strike, France, which was the embarkation area.
Was that like a tent city?
Yeah, tent city. And we went to, they put us on trucks and took us up the Red Ball Highway into Brussels, and then I think we were in Brussels by that time.
Did you guys have an idea of what you were going to be used for? Or?
No, not until we got there. When we got there, we were replacing the 2nd Division, and they had been through the Hurtgen Forest, and they had been in the war I guess since Normandy, but they had done a lot, and they had been really creamed up in the Hurtgen. The 28th and the 2nd were on the front line, and it was December, and tremendous snow on the ground, a lot of snow, and terribly cold. And the 2nd had been on point, just in around the St. Vith area, which is up in Belgium, in the Ardennes forest. And we don't do that with that chair. Thank you. And so the 2nd had dug dugouts in the ground and actually put a roof on it. They maybe got an old sign or something, made metal roofs. So the 2nd left, and we went in, and we were in a forward post, and so that we could see if anything was. There was a a valley we could look over and we could see if anything was happening over here in the middle of a pretty dense forest. So we thought that what was going to happen, it was December, that we were just going to be up there for the winter and just posting in case there were small combat patrols come through. We could take care of them, and we'd put patrols out and see what was going on over there on their side. And it looked like it was going to be a stalemate all winter because it's a very dense forest. We didn't think anything could get through it, like big tanks or anything like that. Little did we know. And I went out on one patrol in the 5 days that I was on the front lines. I went out on one patrol and I came back with the patrol. There were 6 of us on the patrol. And we said, there's a lot going on over here. There's a lot of horse-drawn equipment being moved up by the Germans. And a ton of stuff's coming up, and they're very noisy, and it's something big. So our guys, our lieutenant would relay that to the command post, but nobody paid any attention to it until the 15th, when it all just broke loose.
Were you, before it all broke loose, did you believe that something bad was about to happen?
Well, as I say, I felt like everybody else that it's such an impenetrable area that nothing could really move except maybe personnel, and you don't win a war with just personnel. You win it with artillery and tanks and all kinds of stuff. But I didn't really feel like it was imminent anyhow.
So just to backtrack, from Camp Lucky Strike to St. Vilve?
St. Vith.
St. Vith.
V-I-T-H.
Can you tell me, how did you guys get there? Was it all by truck?
Yeah.
What do you remember seeing about, because these are, now...
You don't see anything. It's in darkness, and when you're not in darkness, you're in this covered truck.
How long was the journey?
Oh, it's 250 miles, maybe.
Oh, so you could do it in a day?
Yeah, you could do it in a day.
Yeah, France is a lot smaller than...
Yeah.
So, tell me then, did you see the veterans of the 2nd getting off the line?
We did. Right.
What do you remember about them?
How ragged they looked.
What do you mean by that?
They looked really tired, and their uniforms were just a mess. Dirty and everything. They were a wreck.
Did this kind of give you a premonition on what you were gonna...
No, that didn't seem to bother me at all.
Did they give you guys any advice?
Oh, you'll be sorry, that kind of stuff. You'll be sorry.
They said that?
They do that in the regular camps. You'll be sorry. That's the mantra.
So, when you're fighting, are most of the guys you're seeing, are they around your age? They're all guys in their 20s, late teens?
Yeah, I'd say they're all in their late teens and 20s.
So then, the area that you take over from the 2nd, is it in the middle of the Ardennes, on the side of the Ardennes?
It's in the middle part.
Talk to me about the Ardennes forest. What do you remember? Like, describe it to me. If I've never been there. So
yeah, it's gorgeous, I'm sure, but it was so cold and miserable, the weather. If it wasn't snowing, it was sleeting on you, and it was difficult to think anything about anything when you're that miserable. And you just couldn't stay warm, of course. You did the best you could, but couldn't stay warm. And our equipment was lousy. Later on, some of the guys that were captured in that came up with Simpson's army from the south, they had all kinds of neat stuff. They had snow packs, which is a combat boot and rubberized combination, not a galosh with a combat boot. They had parkas, that were warm, and they had great looking equipment, and it worked. And we had tired old field jackets and overcoats.
So,
our equipment was not good for what we were doing.
talking about the living conditions, those days that you were on the line.
Well, we lived inside these dugouts, and
What, foxholes?
pardon me.
Like foxholes?
It's larger than a foxhole. It's a foxhole would be about 5 feet deep, 6 feet wide, that type of thing. This was probably 7 feet deep, and you could stand up in it. And it had a slit in the front so that you could put your rifle out and observe things to see if anything was moving out there. And then the second room is where we had our beds, and they actually had a kind of a bunk situation.
So these were permanent dugouts.
Yeah, they were permanent. And when I went back to find them, they were all gone. But some of the guys have found them in earlier trips that they made back to Belgium.
Oh, you've been back to go visit where
I went back to see if I could find any places that I knew of, and I found the church is all I found, which it was really obvious to us. It was in the combat day.
So, can you tell me, you get to the line, what is your objective? What are you guys told to do? Are you being told just to hold the line, or are you
where
guys?
we are.
You're not going to go forward.
We're not going forward. We're holding. Strictly a holding pattern.
So you think if the Germans didn't make that offensive, the Bulge, then you guys would have waited until winter to pass to
Yep.
go?
That's exactly what we would have done.
So how do you spend? You were 5 days on the line.
Yeah, I had one day out on a patrol. The rest of the day I was in the dugout observing.
Anything happened to you those other 4 days?
Nothing.
Tell me about the day on patrol. Talk to me about a patrol first of all.
Well, we went across the valley, and there was a little town. I don't remember the name of it, but they were marshaling horse-drawn equipment into the town. And
so you guys saw a lot of
and
German.
we saw them doing that. And as I said, they were noisy, which generally speaking, you're quiet when you're close to the front lines. So we observed them for about 3 hours doing all of this.
How close were you to the Germans?
Maybe 400 yards, maybe 3 football fields.
And this is the first time you saw them?
Yeah.
Was that eerie, seeing enemy combatants?
No, I didn't feel anything like that.
So after the patrol, I mean, it seemed like a big deal that all this stuff was going on.
We were all to do it, and it was kind of like a field maneuver. So
No, I'm saying, was it a big deal in your opinion that the Germans were doing all this preparation?
yeah.
Did that
I talked to our lieutenant's name was Livingston, and I talked to him pretty hard, and I said, I think they're doing something. I think they're got something going over there. And he says, I'll report it to command post.
Gosh. So then, talk to me about the day all hell broke loose.
That was the 15th, and they started with the bombing, and
Is this in the morning?
in the morning, probably about 7 or 8 o'clock, it started. And a runner came to our dugout and said, evacuate, leave everything, especially leave your gas mask. We carried gas masks, that's how green we were. And that nobody told it, and we just left the gas mask in the dugout. said, "We're moving." So we got out of our dugout and we headed back towards the command post. And we took up, we dug slit trenches there. And he said, "We're taking up a position here."
Who said that? The runner?
Lieutenant.
Oh.
And it was right at it was a knoll right at the head of a road. A road was coming down, and you could look down the road and you could see a church. And the road came down and turned and made practically a 90-degree turn at the end of the road. And we were up on the knoll, semi-dug in, and slit trenches. I guess they didn't think we had enough time to dig foxholes.
Talk to me about a slit trench. Is it like a...
enough to cover you. Mine would be about 6 feet long and about maybe 2 feet deep. You can dig them in no time at all in soft ground. Real easy. Mm-hmm. But you're vulnerable that way too. You know, you're not deep enough to ward off a tree burst or anything like that. So that's generally a temporary thing that you're involved with. So there were a couple of German command cars that came down the road, and our bazooka guy got both of those, and we killed all the people that were in there, and then that was during when the shelling had stopped. The shelling was merciless for about 4 hours, just merciless.
Are we talking about bombs being dropped, or are we talking about artillery?
Artillery. Yeah, it was socked in so hard that the Air Corps couldn't fly. We had no air support at all.
What's the weather? Is it all overcast?
Overcast and snowy.
Oh, it was snowing.
Yeah, overcast and snowy.
So this new position that you had set up with the slit trench, was this still in the Ardennes?
Yeah.
So there's still trees all around?
Yeah, but we're up on a knoll. There isn't any trees up here on this knoll. They're further up, where it'd be the road, and we'd sweep up, and we'd be about here, and then there'd be a mountain in behind it, and trees up at the timberline up there.
So, talk to me about the shelling. Describe it.
Well, the noise, of course, is amazing. I have no way to tell you how bad the noise is. And they had what they call a screamin' Mimi. We call it a screamin' Mimi. It was a rocket. And it was not a very effective weapon, except morale-wise. It was terrible. It sounded so bad. It sounded like it was right on you at all times. And they were shooting them overhead and landing all over the place. And that's when I got wounded. I got wounded by an artillery shell, a tree burst artillery shell, probably their famous 88 that they used.
Talk to me about tree burst for someone who had never heard about a tree burst.
A tree burst is it's a time detonated shell. In other words, it isn't meant to impact and then explode. It's meant to go and then time detonates it in the air, in the middle of the air. They used them extensively in the Hurtgen forest, and they found out they were very, very successful. And so they brought them into the Ardennes and used them there.
So not just shrapnel,
and shrapnel, and sometimes they'd load the missile with. A missile sounds like it's too modern. It wasn't a missile; it was a shell.
Okay.
And sometimes they'd load that shell with old rusty nails, hardware of all kinds of stuff, just to get more expansion, explosion, and that's what hit you.
So, was the danger that it exploded in the air and the shrapnel was coming down, or was the danger it hit the trees and the trees also?
Well, that both ways, but in my particular case, it was straight time detonated and it came flat down. And as I said, I'm in galoshes now. I'm no combat boots. So all I have is a thin piece of rubber to protect me in my foot, and it got into my foot. And I got shot in the back of my leg, and I got shot in my back.
All with shrapnel.
Always shrapnel.
How bad was it?
The foot was amputable. If they were going to amputate it in the POW camp, it had become infected.
And the other?
Because I had the trench foot too.
You still had trench foot?
Oh yeah, and as I said, I froze my feet when I came into France, and it's getting worse. It's not getting better.
Was it getting black?
Not yet. No, they hadn't blacked yet.
So what were you doing to try to keep your feet warm?
Just rub them as much as I could. When I was inside the dugout, I could rub them.
Did it hurt to walk?
Absolutely.
So with trench foot, your feet just swell up, and then
Eventually gangrene sets in.
which is when it becomes black,
Black.
and then it dies. Is what?
Yeah.
Were you afraid that was what's gonna happen, or were you trying your hardest to make sure it didn't?
I knew that was the possibility, but I just didn't. I didn't think that was going to happen. No.
So when you got wounded, sir, was it when you were in the slit trench?
Yeah.
And when you say the shelling was merciless, are we talking about just bombardment, continuous?
Continuous bombardment.
So why are you in the slit trench? Well, why not try to get some cover? Because aren't you out in the open then?
Yeah. Well, you're sort of open. You're dug in a little bit, but not. What do you mean? Get to a cover? This is where we're stationed here. This is where
They won't let you move around.
Hey, no, you're not going to move around. I mean, the advantage of an infantry squad is 12 men with the same idea. So you're set there to be a squad.
Did you think that you weren't going to make it with the
No,
shell in?
That never entered my mind.
Really?
Never.
There's
Yeah.
some guys who think that way, and it happens then, because they give up almost. But
Yeah, there were some.
Besides the noise for shelling, well, for someone who had never experienced anything close to it, what's the best way to try to get someone to understand what it was like for you?
I don't know. It's an experience that it's just amazing experience.
So artillery, in your opinion, was way worse than the small arms?
Oh gosh, yes, yeah. Artillery can kill more than one. Small arms kills only one.
Yeah, because movies, the way they like to portray, bullets are a lot sexier than a piece of shrapnel, right?
Sure.
But it's the artillery.
Artillery's tough.
Gosh. So you get wounded. Is the piece of shrapnel still in your foot?
You mean when? Now?
No, at that point.
Yeah, it's in there. It's got to get dug out.
Oh, how big was it?
Big as my thumbnail,
Oh gosh. It's basically like a bullet almost.
just the size.
So
Deep.
So then, what did you do? Take me through what happened.
All I called for a medic. I was hit, and we all had a pack, a medical kit that we carried with us, and in it was sulfa. And so I called for a medic, and he crawled to my slit trench, and he saw the wounded in the foot. He took the galosh off and sprinkled some sulfa on my foot, and he said, "Your leg's the worst one," and which it wasn't, but he thought it was. It was bloodier than heck. So he put some sulfa there, and then he left for the other guys. And then all of a sudden it stopped. All of the artillery stopped, and we just were there, and then those command cars for the Germans came down the road that I told you about.
Oh, so that happened after you got
Yeah.
wounded.
After we got wounded, I got wounded, and after the artillery barrage.
So tell me again what happened. The bazooka man took them out?
Yeah, the bazooka guy.
Describe that to me.
Yeah.
What do you see?
Well, he was closest to the road, and when they got to the turn, he shot his weapon, and he got him right in the not the gas tank, but in the front, and it exploded, and it set him afire, and they all ran out of the thing, and we shot them with our small arms fire.
The 12 of you guys in your squad, are you guys isolated from other squads? Or you can see other squads around?
We could see the other squads. We could probably see 2 squads, us and another squad.
How many guys were in the German command cars?
It seemed to me that we killed 4 of them there. 2 in the back, and the driver and the guy in the front.
Was that your first time firing your weapon at a combatant?
In the combat, yeah. That was my first time.
What was that like?
I don't know. Never thought about it.
You've never thought about it?
No.
What, it was just something that happened?
I really don't understand the question.
Like, is it just like instinct?
Yeah. Just pull the trigger.
Right? Because that's what you're trained to do.
Yeah.
Isn't that something? So then, now, if they were in command cars, does that mean they were higher ups?
I don't know. They were far enough away that we couldn't see insignias or anything like that. I don't know what rank they were at all. I had no idea. All I know is they were running fast, and they didn't make it.
Because you guys took them out.
Mm.
Now, after that, what happened, sir?
Then it all became quiet. As it's in quiet now, and we were just lying there trying to figure out what's going to happen next. And all of a sudden, from another road that had come in to join this main road, we hear a voice. It's a GI, and he yells up, "You have to surrender, otherwise you're going to get bombed off your place." And
Were those the words he used?
similar, something like that.
Okay.
And so somebody yelled down, are you American? And he said, "Yes, we're with the 422nd. And so some of the guys started to get up and walk down the hill, surrendering. So they destroyed their rifles and started walking down the hill.
They gave up that easy?
They gave up that easy. That's us, that we gave up that easy. And I couldn't walk because of my foot problem, so I had a guy grab me and carry me, half walk me down to the road, and we joined a column of GIs. There were probably 100, 200 of us on the road then. And I was hurting so bad, a couple of German medics came by and they put me on a stretcher. And they stole all my cigarettes, my ring, and my watch.
They stole your ring?
Yeah.
And your watch?
And my watch.
But what I wanted to know is, so...
Hey, 8,000 of us gave up that day.
I know, no. But I'm saying...
Our colonel gave us up, and they said, I mean, if you've read any of those books that you said that you read, why would 8,000 men give up their rifles?
That's what I'm asking.
I am too. I was never proud of this.
Because you don't seem to me like the type of guy who would give up.
No. Some of the guys bolted and went and left, and they were picked up later on. But
so your experience was...
I'm not going to be able to move.
I know that, but I'm saying you're on this knoll.
Yeah.
And the knoll, when you guys hear the voice from the 422,
yeah,
is it in the woods that you hear it, or is it in that road where the German cars...
It's a dirt road butting up into this It's a dirt road butting up into this regular road, concrete road or asphalt road.
So you hear guys say they're gonna bomb you. You need to surrender.
Right.
What goes on in your mind when you hear that?
I don't know. I'm lying there bleeding.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
Did it seem to you like you guys were surrounded?
No, we were not surrounded. I mean, some of our guys got out, at least for a while, and then they got caught. But
So then,
I don't know why.
What was because your lieutenant was the guy who was in charge.
Yeah.
What was his,
His voice was silent. We had no idea. He had been wounded, blown his heel off, and he'd been wounded. He was up at the command post, which was up above us, and we had no voice from him at all.
You mentioned to me earlier that how many guys were killed out of your squad?
5.
All from artillery?
I think so. Yeah, I don't think there was any small arms fire that killed him.
Were you there when it happened?
Yeah.
When they got killed?
Yeah.
Did you know these guys?
They didn't come out of their slit trenches to go to the road.
That's
how we knew.
The artillery was that much. Was it just constantly was raining down?
Yeah.
Sounds horrible. God.
It's the worst thing you've ever heard.
Those 5 guys, were you buddies with them?
The assistant squad leader I was. Yeah, George Whitten.
Can you tell me something about him? Because
I just know that he was from Chicago.
Tell me something about his personality, though, that you remember.
Nice guy. That's just a guy.
Gosh, it's almost as if they were directing it towards you guys, right? Because it was just constant. So you didn't get a reprieve for 4 hours from the shelling.
No.
What went on in your head? Because you told me you never thought that you weren't gonna make it. So when the shelling's constant, are you lying this way or on your back?
I'm lying on my belly.
Okay, on your belly, but you're totally exposed on the back, right? Because it's gonna rain down.
Sure.
What goes on in your head?
I can't remember anything like what I thought of at that time.
I'm assuming you were scared at least, though, right?
I don't think so.
You don't think you were?
I don't think I was scared.
I would be scared.
I think I was. At 19 or 18, you're numb and dumb.
So then you guys start to scramble down the knoll, and you join. What do you see? You just see a lot of GIs without.
A lot of GIs and a whole bunch of Germans.
And this is in the woods?
It's on the road.
Okay.
In the woods where the knoll is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what?
So then they put me on a stretcher and they stole everything. And they take me to an aid station. They had set up an aid station where they were operating on both German and Americans. And they put me on a bench, and then they took me over and put me on an operating table, and they patched up the back of my leg. The piece of shrapnel went in my on the outside and came out this side.
Ooh.
And the flesh was hanging down, so they cut that off and sewed it up a bit. And without anesthesia, that was tough. And they...
You're saying the flesh was hanging out?
Yeah, well, I mean, it went in and came out, and something has to give, and the flesh was hanging out of it. So they cut that off and sewed me up. And then on my back, they patched that up. It was very minor. It was just kind of like in and out, and no shrapnel in there. And it was interesting. I had a knee replacement on this one, probably 5 years ago. And there's a piece of shrapnel still in there.
Oh my God.
A little sliver, that's still in there. Did you know you have a piece of shrapnel in there? No, I didn't.
So then, after they sew you up and fix your back,
Then they take me out and they put
how are
me-
they treating you though?
Hmm?
How do they treat you? I mean, are they treating
They're
you?
treating us as good as possible. I mean, they have no anesthesia. They're operating on their own people without anesthesia. And there's a lot of guys in there getting cut on, you know, because there's a lot of stuff had gone on. So then they took me along with, I think, about 8 other guys, and they put us in our own weapons carrier. They had commandeered everything, of course. They gotten into the motor pool and commandeered it all. They put us in a weapons carrier, and the ride from hell, it was just terrible.
What do you mean the ride from hell?
Well, we had a colonel who had been a flying officer, and for some reason, somehow, they flew and they knocked him down, and he had burns over 80% of his body, and he smelled terribly, of course, and he was dying.
This is an American.
American. And then we had a lieutenant who, he sat here, I sat on the fantail, and the lieutenant sat here. He was a flying officer, and he had his hands flash burned.
What's that?
Something had exploded in the cockpit, and a fire had started, and it flash burned his hands. So his hands were all wrapped up. So when he had to pee, I had to unzip his pants, pull his Johnson out, let him pee.
Gosh.
What an experience that was.
But you said it was an ammo carrier?
No, it was a weapons carrier.
Is that like a truck or?
Yeah, it's a truck, a little larger truck than a Jeep.
So what other kind of cases were in there?
We had a guy that had a belly wound, and the colonel kept kicking this fellow, you know, not because the colonel wanted to, but he did, and every time he did it, this guy would shriek, you know.
Well, why would he kick him?
Awful.
But why would he kick him?
Because the colonel was lying on the ground, and so was this guy. He was on the floor. There were 3 on the floor, and then the rest of them were on the sides, and then I was on the fantail.
See, these are all the wounded.
Everyone is wounded in some kind of wounds, you know. So, yeah, that was terrible. So then they drive us to Cologne, or try to.
This is all the same day?
Same day. By now it's nighttime.
Okay.
Yeah. And we get into Cologne, and they had just been bombed by probably the British. They're doing night bombing. And they...
What do you remember seeing about the destruction?
Destruction was enormous.
Describe it.
Everything was just a pile of rubble. People coming out. The bombing must have just taken place because people were coming out of this rubble, and it was just mounds of it everywhere. And we were by the cathedral, which is a world famous Cologne cathedral, and it had been damaged too, severely damaged in the raids. So it's a wonder they didn't just pull us out of the trucks and kill us, you know, because of, say, American trucks. And boy, it was amazing.
Because civilians oftentimes, when the bomber guys would parachute into cities, they would kill them.
Yeah, of course they would, sure. So then that night, they put us in a kind of a hostel, an area where they had Russian POWs, and these guys gave up their beds to us.
The Russians?
The Russians did. And they were working on the railroads. When they bombed the railroads, the next day the Russians would go out as slave labor and rebuild the railroad track to keep the rail cars running. And we were there for a night, and that's when the colonel died, the guy that was burned so terribly. He died there at night, and that's where I had my shrapnel removed. One of the camp medics removed the shrapnel from my foot, piece of shrapnel about the size of my thumbnail. And I did that without anesthesia, and I passed out when the knife hit me. Thank God for that. I woke up crying, which is, an infantryman's not supposed to cry, you know.
Yeah, but I mean,
Must have hurt.
You're in severe pain.
Yeah, it must have hurt. I don't know, but it must have. This Russian must have been 6'6". He picks me up like I'm a sack of flour. He just puts me in the upper bunk. You know, it was amazing. It was amazing.
Was there camaraderie between the Russians and the Americans?
We had a guy that could speak Polish, and the language is similar, and they could understand each other. And he's the one that said the colonel will die tonight. So we all knew that that was going to happen.
Did you talk to could the colonel talk?
Oh no, he was in such misery. You know, he was just miserably.
You think it was because of the cockpit fire or something?
What?
The reason he was burned because of a fire?
Some kind of a fire had taken place for him. Yeah.
And, so his burns were still fresh.
Yeah, he was still wrapped in the original cosmoline that they put all over them. You know.
Oh gosh.
Some kind of a salve that they use.
So then? Then where'd you go?
Then the next day they took us to another camp, which was a very interesting camp. This was let's see now, we're talking about the 17th, aren't we?
Oh, these are a long 2 days.
17th or 18th now. Yeah. Yeah, they took us to a really pristine camp outside of Cologne. And it was a German, what it was, they were raising German babies with Russian girls.
What?
They had taken these Russian women from when they invaded Russia, and they brought them back and they set them up in this camp. And they were having babies for the Fuhrer. And then they were going to raise them, you know, to be German soldiers.
I thought that they thought the Russians were inferior, though.
They did, but these girls were special, you know. One of them brought her baby in, and she was a doll, just the cutest she could be. And I got into a hospital bed with sheets, and I was with GIs and Germans in this kind of a hospital that they had for the camp. And I spent about 4 days there like that. And I was hurting pretty bad. And I made friends with one of the nurses. And we were told not to say it, that we were Americans and to not speak. Because the German guys in there might have been feisty about us or whatever. So we weren't, but I made friends with this nice little nurse. And on Christmas Eve, she came in and gave me a shot of morphine. And that was the best Christmas present I had ever had, believe me.
Because you were in that much pain.
I was in that much pain, yeah. My feet were just killing me with the frozen feet and the swellings, you know, and the wound in my left foot. It was just killing me. Really awful. And then after that experience, they took us to the main camp, which is a POW hospital outside of Cologne, about 5-10 kilometers outside of Cologne. And we had over 5,000 of us in there, both officers and men. And they had British, they had Aussies, they had Russian, they had Poles, they had French. A French medic took care of my foot. Every day he'd come in and massage my foot, which was wonderful. And that's when we started to realize that we weren't going to eat. The food rations started to become very small.
Is this the camp that ended up being your permanent camp for a while?
This is a permanent camp.
What was the name of the camp?
Don't remember. All they do, they call it a Hoffenstahl 5 or something like that. It's a hospital.
Describe it to me. Is it like a barbed wire fence?
I don't know. I was never out of my barracks, what it was.
Because you were wounded.
I'm wounded. Yeah, I'm.
So you never went out and about?
Never went out of the barracks that they put us in.
Is it a special barracks for wounded?
Yeah, well, all of us were wounded. It's a hospital camp.
It's a hospital camp.
Yeah, strictly a hospital.
Okay.
Camp. Yeah.
Okay, so continue.
And this French medic took care of my foot. And because the doctor that was in charge of the surgery wanted to take the foot off. They were doing a lot of amputations, and he was the kind that he didn't want to be bothered. He was a Polish POW is what he was, and so they just were cutting up a lot of people, and the French medic went to bat for me and said, "I can save this guy's foot." He says, "Okay, be my guest."
So,
Save the foot.
Talk to me about the ration situation.
Well, we went down to about probably 500-600 calories a day there. We were get a little bread and a little honey, and every now and then we get a little piece of meat, and then we get some soup and tea, and that's all we had. You getting tired? It's 1 o'clock. The food was probably down to about 700 calories. We did have a little extra meat every now and then, maybe once a week. I was there for about, I think, 45 days, around in there sometime.
What kind of things would you do to pass the time if you're in a hospital?
Nothing. We're in the hospital. We're just sitting there thinking about food. That's one of the major things about hunger, is that you can't think about anything else. I never heard a dirty joke. I never heard talk about a woman or anything like that. It's just food, and you're just overcome by the want and need for food. And we're constantly hungry.
So that's what's on your mind 24/7?
24/7. Nothing else.
Take me through again a typical day's ration.
Well, they give us tea in the morning.
For breakfast?
That was breakfast.
No food for breakfast?
No food.
Tea?
Tea. Lunch, we'd get some potato soup, maybe a piece of meat. And at night at nighttime we'd get a piece of meat and some bread. 1/6 of a loaf of bread, maybe.
And then how big are the pieces of meat?
It'd be about 2 inches by 2 inches.
That's it?
Yeah.
How frail are the guys getting? They must be like literally losing weight.
I was losing I went from 195 to 125 in 100 days.
And you were at the hospital camp for 45 days?
45 days.
And after the hospital camp?
They took me to Siegburg, which is a little town sort of northeast of Cologne. And they're getting ready to put us on a train. And they're going to take us down to the main camp. What had happened is that the British, with the Lancaster bomber, had come on a bombing raid, a night bombing raid, and unfortunately they didn't hit their target, so they carried their bombs back. And what they do is that they dump the bombs in the Rhine River, rather than try to land their aircraft with the bomb with an actuary bomb on it, or actual bomb on it. So they dump them in the Rhine River. This one night, they dumped them around Koblenz. They didn't make the river. They made another POW camp, which knocked out a tremendous amount of guys in this Koblenz POW camp. And this was a straight POW camp, but not a hospital camp. So they took the most severe of all the wounded and moved them up to our camp north of Cologne. And that's when I got my Bronze Star. Is that one of my friends had been in this camp well, he wasn't exactly a friend, he was just an acquaintance. But he was with the 106th, and his feet had been terribly frostbitten, and they were running pus, and I was one of 3 or 4 guys that gave a direct blood transfusion to him in the POW camp. So they gave me a Bronze Star for that.
How much blood did you give?
Probably a pint, maybe less.
You didn't really have that. You know, that's.
Of course not. You don't have it at all.
So why did you do that?
Well, it seemed like the right thing to do.
He survived?
No, he died. Had to amputate both of his feet, and he died on the table. Not very much worth it, was it?
I think it's the fact that you were willing to.
Probably.
What was his name?
Harry. I don't remember the last name. Harry Kavanaugh? I don't know.
So after the severely wounded went to the hospital camp, there was no longer any room for you guys?
Right.
So they were
anybody that was halfway able to move, they put on the road. So they put me on a horse-drawn cart, and they carried me over to Siegburg. And that's when they were assigning us the railroad cars to take us to Bad Orb. And so they put us up in a monastery that night, and the nuns fed us a little extra food, which was wonderful. And next morning, we got on a train, and we were in a boxcar. For 3 days, we were in the boxcar.
How many guys in a boxcar?
I think there was about 80 of us. It was awful. Terrible.
Is this the same boxcar that's only supposed to fit like 8 horses? Or
40 and 8. 40 people or 8 horses.
So you're double capacity.
I don't think we were double, but I think we were at maybe 60. But the major problem is there's no way to throw the excrement.
So what do you do?
You know, there's a little slit hole up in the far corner, and you try to pitch it out there. And it's got a screen on it too, you know.
What do you mean you try to pitch it out there, like
pitch the pee out of the window. Try to get rid of it. They gave us a can to pee in and crap in, but no way to dump it. So we were, it gets full. 60 guys, it got full.
The smell must have been horrible.
Oh, I mean, the whole thing, no food for 3 days. It was horrible.
So where's the boxcar take you to?
Frankfurt on Mainz, which was about maybe 40 miles south or 50 miles south of Siegburg. And that they got us out of there, and then they gave us the kids to guard us, the blood and honor boys. They carry a dagger, and on it says Blur and Ur, blood and honor, and they're the Hitler Youth.
Are these kids your age, or are they smaller?
They're 14, 15, 16. 12.
That must have been pretty degrading, being guarded by a bunch of kids.
It was, and they're carrying these knives and weapons, and they are scary. They don't let you move 1 inch. And we're, we aren't in the best of shape. We're in terrible shape because we're all ex-wounded or still nursing our wounds or things, and we're emaciated. We look terrible, and everything about us is we're dirty. We haven't showered in months, and
when was the last time you had showered?
When I was in France, in England.
Really?
Mm-hmm. We had lice. We had all that stuff.
Now, what month is this? Oh, hold on.
We're in January.
So, what month is this?
It's probably the end of February. I'd say it's the end of February. I lose track of that.
So then what happened? After you made it to Frankfurt, is this when the kids put you on the march?
They put us on the walking to Bad Orb.
Is it still snowing?
No, it's now reasonably clear, and the weather is beginning to warm a little bit, so we're comfortable now. But we're hungry, and they give us only bread on the march. And it was 34 kilometers from Frankfurt Railroad Station to the camp. And that's about 20 miles. We made it in a day and a half.
Are guys dropping down?
They are, and if they did and they couldn't get up, they were left behind with a guard, and eventually they were caught up to us.
So what camp do you walk to?
It's called Bad Orb, Stalag 9B.
And at this point, how are you doing health-wise?
Well, my feet are in terrible shape, of course. Still in my galoshes, and I'm...
Are you on a stretcher, or are you walking?
No, I'm walking. I toughed it up and walked it. How I did it, I don't know, but my feet are in just terrible condition.
What about the other wounds? Your leg?
Oh, the leg, that was just flesh,
Okay.
the skin, and the back was minor too.
Talk to me about the pain every time you walk. Is it feel like a dagger is stabbing you? What's it feel like?
Well, I don't have much feeling in my feet. But the wound was still very sore, so it felt like I was, I don't know how to explain it. It just was
Pain.
just constant pain, yeah.
So you make it to Stalag 9B,
9B.
and talk to me about your experiences
Well,
there.
in 9B, an awful lot of our 106 guys were there. They had been there from the very beginning, and those that weren't wounded were taken here to this camp. And it was strictly nothing but privates, PFCs, and corporals. That's all we had there.
So officers had their own camp?
Yeah, they did not keep officers with us. In the hospital camps, we had officers with us.
Do you think the camps with only officers, do you think they were treated better or something? Why would they separate it?
I don't know. You would know better than that if you've interviewed any of the guys. There's a guy in the Palm Desert by the name of Don. I've got his name and address. I'll give it to you. He's really a nice guy. He's a lieutenant. He actually escaped 4 different times, so you might be interested.
What?
Yeah. So you might be interested in seeing him.
But continue though.
Okay.
No.
So anyhow, I got to the camp, and it was stuffed. And this had been an old National Guard camp, German National Guards. And it had been a cavalry camp. So the barracks were, the front was for the men, and the back was for the horses. So the POWs that had been there from the very beginning were in the bunks in the front, but there were no room for us, so they put us where the horses were. So we were on concrete in the back of the, we had no bunks, we laid on the floor with a blanket on the floor, and that's how I lived out the rest of my, probably another 50 days there. 45 days, 50 days there.
And then what happened?
Then I got liberated.
Did you get you must have got liberated after May though.
Oh, April 1st, Easter Sunday.
You got liberated before the war was over.
Oh yeah.
How?
Patton was mad. His nephew had been captured, and he was mad. So he crossed the bridge at Remagen and came up the valley, and we could see him coming up. And he got there with his 36th Division and liberated us on Easter Sunday.
Wow.
Merry Easter.
Now, what I wanted to know though is how did the Germans treat you guys, the guards? Was there a relationship between the guards and the prisoners?
We had some GIs that were very good German speakers, and they were our liaisons to the German commandants and the guards. But I don't believe we ever saw a guard. I didn't see a guard all the time I was there.
You didn't see a single guard?
No. But only when we'd screw up.
But how are you?
There was nobody ever came by the barracks that was a guard.
How are you spending your time in this camp?
Thinking about food, talking about food, writing down about food, nothing but food.
But this time, are you able to walk about, or
I can walk now.
You?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm limping, but I'm walking.
What kind of things do you do to pass the time?
Think about food.
Oh, besides that,
That's it. That was it. Nothing else. We had our camp chores like emptying the slop buckets and things like that. But
what kind of barriers did they have from you escaping? Was it big fences or?
Big fences all around.
I thought that the job of a soldier once captured is to try to figure out how to escape.
Yeah, well, that's a little different from where we were. As you probably know in reading the books that you've read, the Germans had commandeered quite a few American uniforms. And during the Battle of the Bulge, they dressed a lot of Germans in American uniforms. And they rerouted traffic as spies. They got in every place. And so we had two chaplains with us. We had a Roman Catholic priest, Father Kelly, and another a Methodist minister, and they were in there to keep the spiritual part of the thing going. And they told us that if you escape, you have to know the password, otherwise the Americans will kill you. So we didn't want to be killed by our own guys. So he said the best thing to do is stay here. You're going to be liberated. It's only going to be days. Stay here. So that's what we did.
Wow. Now, how did you guys hear about Patton coming? Or did you only notice after?
We could see him coming up the valley. We could see the troops coming up the valley. This area is a pristine area. It hadn't been bombed or anything. It was just gorgeous.
Is this in Western Germany?
No. It's in central Germany. Mm-hmm. But it's what they call the bath country. And they have all these mineral baths. And so Goering and his commandants and all the German officers would take their secretaries there for an R&R time. And no bombs or anything. There was nothing military about it. So they survived the war very well. We could see, we were up on this high, it was a mountain, and we could look down the valley and we could see Patton's troops coming. That was exciting.
Now, I know guys who I've talked to in Japanese POW camps, Americans died at an amazing rate, yeah. 250 a day.
Yeah.
Were there deaths occurring at this camp?
There were, but they were very small. I lost I had a guy by the name of R.A. Smith who was in the bunker with me on the front line in the Ardennes. And the reason he died in the camp is that he traded food for cigarettes. He was hooked on cigarettes, and he couldn't give up his cigarettes, so he traded his food away. Well, naturally, he starved himself to death.
Really?
Yeah.
Talk
Crazy.
to me about the underground black market in the camps.
So that was all based on cigarettes. If you had cigarettes, you could get anything you wanted.
Like what?
An American cigarette was worth $5 about. You know.
What kind of things did you
You
smoke?
play poker with them and everything. And if you got we got 2 Red Cross parcels while I was in the camp. The first one I split with. It was before I got there. It was at the hospital I got it. I split it 2 ways, and so I got some cigarettes. They were all part of the parcel. They came out of Argentina. It's amazing.
Did you smoke back then?
Oh yeah, like I was a 2-pack a day guy.
2-pack a day?
Yeah.
How are you still here?
I don't. Well, I gave it up in the 50s, so I rehabbed myself. But anyhow, cigarettes were the medium of exchange.
What was like the top thing a person could get with cigarettes?
Candy bars. Maybe a loaf of bread. Cheese.
Is this only within the prisoners or also with the guards?
No, you were dealing with the cigarettes with the guards. The guards were had the contraband, I guess.
Yeah.
They were the only. We had a few details that left to bury some of our guys. Maybe they got food from the outside. I don't know. But we just somehow or another, if you had cigarettes, you could get anything you wanted.
Gosh,
Not anything, but I mean, extra food.
I just want to know though. Besides thinking about food, 24/7, take me through a typical day in POW camp. At this one, this is Stalag. You wake up. When do you wake
up? In
up?
the morning, and you'd have tea.
Yeah, okay.
And then you'd sit around and you pick the lice out of your clothes.
Are these the big lice or are these the hair lice?
It's a small clothes louse. It gets into the seams of your clothes and walks and just drives you nuts because its back is like a back of an armadillo and it rubs against your skin.
Ugh.
So you take off all your clothes and you pick the lice out. That was the #1 deal.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd sit around and write menus, and
Menus?
that's what you do. You think about food, nothing but food.
Okay, so after writing menus,
More menus. We had nothing to do.
okay, after writing menus, then what?
Think about food.
And then you eat your lunch?
Then lunch we'd get a 1/6 of a loaf of bread.
Uh-huh.
And then, lunchtime we got the potato soup. Rotten potato soup. We had a helmet liner I had a helmet liner that had a stick in the hole that kept it from leaking. And they'd give you a scoop of soup in that helmet liner. And you ate out of that with my spoon. And then at night you got a 1/6 of a loaf of bread, no butter, no meat, no nothing.
Now,
When think about food too.
when you got captured, do they take away all your gear, your helmet and everything?
No, they took away only my cigarettes, my watch, and my ring.
But what happened to your gun?
Well, I had blown my gun up.
How do you blow your gun up? With a grenade?
You just push it in the ground, put the dirt in the muzzle, and shoot a cartridge.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, so did you have your helmet with you in the camp?
Mm-hmm.
Are you wearing it? No, it's not like you're wearing it.
No, I wear it when I go out of the barracks, which is very seldom. Yeah.
Or but you weren't in barracks at the last one, you were in the horse stalls.
I was in the horse stall in Bad Orb, yeah. What are you getting at?
Isn't that where you got liberated? In the
Yeah.
in the horse stalls?
Yeah.
How many guys were at this camp?
I'd say 5,000.
Five that. And how big are we talking about? Was the
Huge. It's an old National Guard camp, German National Guard camp. They probably had 600 cavalry guys there before the war.
so are you allowed just to walk about?
Yeah, on your side there were different compounds. We had a Russian compound, they had a British compound, they had an Australia, New Zealand compound, and they had an American compound.
How bad's morale?
Well, every night we had a pot-bellied stove in the back where we were, and they gave us plenty of firewood so we could fire that up, which kept us fairly warm. And it was warming up now, and now we're into March, and it's beginning to warm up a little. And every night we'd have a talk by one of the guys, what he's going to do after he gets back and liberated and everything like that. And that's how we kept up the morale.
What would you say?
Well, I was the only one that was going back to school. I was going on to college.
What kind of things would the other guys say?
Oh, they were, I'm going back to the farm, or I'm going to be going back to my wife or something like that. I have a family that I'm taking care of, and they all had something.
So, explain to me the process of being liberated. What happens?
Well, on Easter Sunday, they came through the gate.
What happened to all the guards? They just
The
gave
guards
up?
3 days before left. There weren't any guards in the place.
So why didn't you guys leave then?
I just told you before, if we didn't know the password, we would have been killed by our own troops. Even looking ragged because of what had happened in the Battle of the Ardennes.
So that was a really big factor.
Big factor in that.
I always thought that was a very small thing in history, but that changed your entire...
It changed the entire thing.
So you guys weren't even trying to dig tunnels or anything?
Nothing. Not in our camp.
Wow.
A lot of that tunnel digging and stuff like that was done on the camps that were further east deeper into Germany. Now, we weren't that deep into Germany. We were just 30 miles from the Rhine, or 35 miles from the Rhine.
Wow.
So we're pretty narrow, and the battlefields are pretty close to us still.
As Patton's in 36 is coming closer to you, are there battles happening, or is it almost like you see it straight?
He just coming straight on. Nothing in his way.
Is it dramatic the way they do it? Do they just open up the gate and let you guys out?
No, they just open up the gate and come in.
And they give you guys food, I'm assuming.
Right then they start, and then they see how bad off we are, so they get a Red Cross they notify the Red Cross, and the Red Cross brings their truck in. And of course they bring in all their food, and we all got sick because it was so rich. Candy bars and everything. We all got sick and filled up all the slit trenches.
Oh my God! Imagine that. So take me through your personal journey after being liberated.
I got sick. I got
because you ate
pneumonia.
too much.
I got pneumonia, and I think where I got the pneumonia is that it took about a week. It seems to me like it was about a week for them to start moving us out of the camp, and they'd fly gasoline into the troops, and then they'd take us back with the C-30s transport planes. And I had caught pneumonia, so I was on a stretcher. I'll back up and say, they took us into a field, first of all. They stripped us of all our clothes, and they deloused us with DDT, sprayed us with DDT.
That's not healthy. That's bad for you.
Of course not. They didn't know that, though. And they issued new clothes, and our clothes didn't fit or anything. But I mean, were so happy I hadn't had a bath for 4 months, you know, terrible. And that sounds awful, but it really wasn't that bad. We didn't stink that bad. I don't know why, but we didn't. And
You didn't brush your teeth either, I'm assuming.
no, I lost a lot of teeth.
It looks like you have teeth to me.
No, they're all capped. You lose calcium when you're when you don't have nutrition.
When you're malnourished.
Yeah, yeah.
So a lot of guys would lose teeth?
Oh yeah, a lot of us lost teeth. I lost 6, I think.
Where?
All in the back primarily.
Yeah?
Yeah. Bottom and everything. So
after they deloused you?
that's when I think I got pneumonia.
Okay.
They put me on the aircraft and I'm beginning to cramp.
Okay.
They put me on the C-30 and they flew us back to Lucky Strike, France. And there they didn't know what to really do with us, so they fed us 8 times a day. Crazy. Crazy. So I missed the first boat home because
What?
I was sick.
Okay.
I was in the hospital.
At this point, had the war ended?
No. While I was there, it ended. Yeah. I was on the water, I think, when VE Day was proclaimed. May 13th. Yeah, I was on the water, coming home. And this was April. So, no, but what happened, Roosevelt died. And it was a mournful time for the people there.
What were your thoughts?
I had been raised by a Republican family, of course, and they never were Roosevelt fans, and so they weren't, I wasn't that unhappy, but there were a tremendous amount of people who were really crying and everything. It was a horrible time.
He was that loved.
He was that loved. He really was. Well, we had guys with us, you know, that had been with the WPA and had been with the CCCs. Some of those guys that were with us in the squads that I was with, and they knew what depression really was and what he did for the depression. And of course now, I think he was a wonderful president. Wonderful. I've changed my attitude
Towards him. So then, you get back home?
Yeah, I'm on the water when VE Day comes, and they give us a 90-day furlough. And I went home to Detroit. My family came over to Chicago, and they picked me up and took me home to Detroit. And I rehabbed there, and right in the middle of my furlough, they called me to Miami Beach to stand summary court-martial to tell them whether I had deserted or was a POW.
Did everyone who was a POW, they had to go through that?
I don't know. They just did it for a lot of us.
Okay.
And they put us in a big hotel down there, and we went in front of this tribunal, and then half hour later we were out, and everybody was happy, you know. And at the same time, we had to take a physical because we were scheduled to be the cadre for the invasion of Japan. And I couldn't pass a physical because of my injury to my left foot. So they took me up to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, and trained me to be a PX clerk. So then they put me up into Wisconsin, up in the cranberry bogs, and I was guarding German prisoners of war and acting as an assistant PX clerk.
We treated the Germans a lot better than they treated us, right?
Of course we did.
We're almost through, but just tell me, describe to me the sense of the living conditions in a German POW camp.
In the camp I was in? Well, of course they're filthy, and we don't shower, and the food is abominable, what there is of it, which is nothing, and so consequently It's a most miserable of all places. It's just terrible.
All right. What are some life lessons you've learned from your time overseas?
Well, having been hungry and realizing what hunger does to a person has changed my life dramatically. I have, my wife and I are large contributors to Heifer International, which is an organization that devotes themselves to providing farm animals to people that are in poverty and have hunger problems. And because of my hunger time in Germany, hunger is something that I have spent a lot of money working towards alleviating in some way. And that I feel has changed my life.
After World War II, what's your viewpoint on war?
There'll always be wars, because essentially man is evil, and until God strikes him, it's not going to change. So just be ready for the next one.
What would you want to say to all of those men who did not make it out of World War II? Your buddies.
Oh, goodness.
What would you say to them?
I'd say I'm so sorry you didn't, because it's been so much fun just moving on. It's just been wonderful. I mean, the time that we spent in that mess fades, and life gets a lot better. And you missed it, and I'm sorry.
What life advice or messages would you like to leave for future generations?
The stamping out of hunger is probably the greatest effort that we as individuals can provide. Hunger must be alleviated, and any way we can do it is the right way to do it.
If you were to give me some wisdom, what would you say?
I'd say keep on keeping on, and I'd say get involved with your knowledge. Take your knowledge, condense it down, and take that knowledge and be active with it.
How do you want to be remembered?
I just want to be remembered as a good father and a strong Christian and a loving individual.
Talk to me about the surrender. You mentioned about 8,000 guys surrendered the same time you did.
Mm.
Talk to me about your viewpoint on that and how it all played out.
Well, I think that 8,000 guys with guns should have fought their way out. For years, I was ashamed of the fact that I was a POW, until I recognized that there was no way I could escape. My leg was impossible. I would have been a burden on anybody to escape. But I still felt that what the Colonel did for us, Cavender did for us, was unacceptable. I think we should have fought our way out.
Now that you've done I'm assuming you've done background research on the situation that you were in.
Mm-hmm.
You said that you weren't surrounded.
No.
So what happened? Why did the Colonel give you guys up? And did he surrender himself?
Yes, he did. He was a prisoner of war too. Yes. Uh, his unit that he was attached to, which is the 422nd, was surrounded, and the 423rd was adjacent to it. So he just surrendered us both.
But when he surrendered you both, that's not 8,000 guys. That's only 2 regiments, which
Well,
is.
there's in each regiment there's about 4,000.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
It's a group.
Wow. So he gave you guys up.
Yeah.
Gosh. And you touched on this briefly, though. Actually, before we continue, what was his reason? His reason was because they were surrounded?
Yeah. He didn't feel that there was any way to fight our way out.
Talk to me about the stigma of being a prisoner of war after World War II. Was that you said that you were ashamed of it.
I was.
Why?
Well, one of the questions I always get and I have no answer for is that, why didn't you try to escape? And most of the time I was incapacitated, so I couldn't escape. I felt I couldn't escape. I may have had opportunities, but I really didn't recognize the opportunities. So, in searching myself, I feel that if I'd have mustered all the strength that I could, I probably should have tried. But I didn't.
Well, so you're resentful over the fact that you didn't try to escape?
I just feel like I could have been better. I could have been better. But, you're different, but as I say, at 19, you're numb and dumb. And it just was not a
Hindsight's 20/20.
yes, always. Armchair quarterbacks are the best.
Last question. Was it easy for you to readjust to civilian life coming home?
Yeah, very easy. I'd have a few nightmares, but that ended pretty quickly.
What would the nightmares be of?
Of the camp, not enough food, struggling for food.
What kind of places does your mind go to when you don't have food?
I don't have these anymore because I always have food.
What kind of places did your mind go to? And in the camp, when you don't have food, you're just thinking about food?
Restaurants or mother's home cooking.
But was there a particular dish that you always thought of?
Yeah, my mother made what she called a city chicken, which was pork on a skewer. And I loved that, and so I always seemed to come up with that first.
Got it.